Story 1. The Colombian serial killer Pedro Alonso Lopez, known as the Monster of the Andes, raped and murdered over 300 girls from Ecuador, Peru, and Colombia. After he was caught and imprisoned for 18 years, he was put in a psychiatric hospital. There, he was reviewed, declared sane, and set free, despite his blatant avowal that he fully intends to kill again. Since his release in 1998, nobody knows where he is or what he is doing. He is supposed to be 71 years old at present. He is known for being the most prolific killer ever. Story 2. There is a genetic disease called fibrodysplasia ossificans progressiva. When tissue is damaged, it is replaced with bone. Growths form underneath their skin, and their joints lock solid. So over time, those affected slowly become encased in a prison of bone just beneath their own skin. They usually have to choose between sitting or standing up for the rest of their life. By the end of their life, they have to drink every meal through a straw and can barely move. Story 3. Over 90% of serial killers choose their victims through sexual desire. In fact, many serial killers have been caught because they return to the body of their victims to masturbate. Story 4. Bacteria and viruses can be frozen for millions of years and still be viably infectious. Having never encountered humanity before, they could have catastrophic results if they are uncovered and manage to infect a person or animal. Not to worry, though. It's not like millions of ancient pathogens are currently trapped in permafrost, which is now melting bit by bit each day. Story 5. Your eyes have a separate immune system from the rest of your body. If they get damaged in such a way that it affects anything other than your eyes, your regular immune system can attack the damage and will not recognize them, meaning your own body can permanently blind you. What's worse, your body cannot tell the difference between either eye. If one of them gets infected or damaged, your immune system can attack your healthy eye and take away your sight entirely. Story 6. Rosemary Kennedy was John F. Kennedy's sister. She suffered from oxygen deprivation at birth, and that unfortunately stunted her mental growth. She had a pretty decent childhood, but as she grew older, she began to act out. Afraid that her behavior would risk his political career, her father, Joseph, agreed to have her lobotomized. Her mother, Rose, was against it and forbade him from doing it. So he did it behind her back when she went on a trip. After the operation, Rosemary's already low intelligence quotient was lowered even further, to the point she could no longer walk or communicate. Her family had her locked up in an institution and basically disowned her. They never visited and never publicly acknowledged her anymore. Rosemary died at the age of 86. Her mother never forgave her husband for what he had done. Story 7. Remember that bath salts cannibal guy from a couple of years back? He wasn't high on bath salts when he did that. That was just media speculation and nonsense. They only found marijuana in his system during the autopsy. We still have no idea why he flipped out. Story 8. The men of the ship Essex, the true event that inspired the story Moby Dick, avoided islands after being shipwrecked for fear of cannibals. The islands were settled, and landing there would have brought salvation to the survivors. Ironically, because of this bypass, the men ran out of food and were forced to eat each other for survival. Story 9. There is a fungus, cordyceps, that can actually brain control insects, forcing them to move to a higher location where they will eventually die and release more cordyceps spores. Story 10. The bottom of Lake Superior is cold enough that the bodies of dead sailors just remain. They don't really decompose because it's at freezing temperatures, so they instead get a coating of adipocere, which is liquid body fat, hardened around them. Gordon Lightfoot wasn't lying when he wrote, "The lake never gives up her dead." Story 11. In 1975, the Central Intelligence Agency had a heart attack gun. Kills people and then the dart disintegrates. Just imagine what is classified now. Story 12. A fire whirl can reach the size of an enhanced Fujita Scale 3 tornado. In 1923, such an event occurred in Japan during an earthquake. It resulted in the deaths of 38,000 people in less than 15 minutes. Story 13. Elmer McCurdy was a failed Old West outlaw. His preserved body was put on display in a traveling carnival, and years later, He was eventually assumed to be a mannequin until he was used on set for the television show The $6 Million Man. His arm accidentally fell off during the shoot, revealing bone and muscle and showing that he was a corpse, not a mannequin. Story 14. After raping his blindfolded victims, the Golden State Killer would be very quiet and pretend like he was gone. Right when the victims would start to move towards the phone or try to untie themselves, he would scare them. Story 15. One reason that crows and ravens are associated with death is because they would often follow armies as they marched to battle. Being both carrion birds and extremely intelligent, they realized that a large group of armed men marching in one direction meant there would be a tasty meal of corpses to eat soon afterward. Story 16. Imagine being totally aware of someone performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation, but you physically can't move or respond. Well, that's what happens when you get bitten by a blue-ringed octopus. You have approximately 6 minutes between being bitten and someone starting cardiopulmonary resuscitation to keep your heart and lungs functioning to ensure you survive, all while being totally aware of what is happening to you. Neurotoxins are fun. Story 17. Your brain can play tricks on you to make you see monsters in the mirror, called the Troxler effect. The Troxler effect is an optical illusion that affects how you perceive things, both visually and mentally. Story 18. I once read that you should play dead if a bear attacks you, unless they start licking your wounds because that means they plan to eat you. That still haunts me to this day. Edit. If it helps, I'm pretty sure I was reading about grizzly bears at the time during one of my fevered, grizzly man, rabbit holes. Story 19. If the sun exploded right now, you would be blissfully unaware of it for just over 8 minutes while the energy travels at the speed of light to get to you. Story 20. It was not until 1987 that the American Academy of Pediatrics declared it unethical to operate on newborns without anesthesia. Until surprisingly recently, the medical community felt it would be dangerous to give infants anesthesia and believed that they did not feel pain. Story 21. Female mummies in ancient Egypt were always more decomposed than their male counterparts. Researchers discovered that this was because male bodies were embalmed much sooner than female bodies. Female bodies were kept at the family home until they started to decompose to avoid necrophilia by the embalmers. Story 22. Sense of impending doom is an actual symptom that often precedes death, usually in cases of heart attack. Very creepy for some of us who suffer from anxiety and panic attacks to begin with, as both share that symptom. As many of you are pointing out, yes, I used precede incorrectly. Story 23. Since 2007, at least 20 detached human feet have been found on the coasts of the Salish Sea. Story 24. According to Abraham Lincoln's bodyguard, William Crook, he said Lincoln had a dream about his own assassination 3 nights in a row before he was killed. Crook told Lincoln not to go on that fateful night, and all Lincoln said was, "Goodbye, Crook," before he went to the play. This was very odd as Lincoln always said, "Good night, not goodbye." Story 25. I bring this up at parties all the time. When climbing Mount Everest, there's a point nicknamed Rainbow Valley or Rainbow Ridge, because it is absolutely littered with the bodies of people who attempted to make the climb. The combination of the extremely cold temperature and the bright snowsuits means that they have become a never-rotting but colorful landmark. Story 26. Mount Everest is covered in frozen corpses because removing them is very unsafe and time-consuming. They are easily viewed from the climbing routes, and some are used as trail markers. Story 27. The origins of vampires as we know them. Basically, your body has gas buildup when you die. I am not medically inclined enough to explain why. Basically, the gas has to escape somehow, and so it would pass through the vocal cords in the throat. This creates the low moan that makes the body sound as if it was in pain. The people back then had no idea what was happening, and random bodies would just start moaning in pain. Thus, they believed that the bodies were rising from the dead. When stabbed, the gas escaped otherwise, leading to the belief that the only way to stop a vampire was to stab a dead body in the chest. This also led to a lot of strange burials, like the man that was buried in a stone wall to prevent him from rising from the dead. I cannot really blame them. I would be freaked out too if a corpse suddenly started to make sounds. Creepy for some, but I find stuff like that fascinating. There are documentaries on YouTube talking about it. I highly recommend them. Edit. Words cannot describe how happy I am that so many of you provided additional facts. I am having a blast reading your comments. I do not know much about this topic, and so it is great to have a place where more information and leads are constantly being shared. If you have any recommendations yourselves, please link them in your comment. I would love to see them. Story 28. After getting stung by a cone snail, you do not feel the sting for a little bit. There is no antivenom and it can be lethal. Treatment is basically keeping the victim alive until the venom wears off. Story 29. From Atlas Obscura by Thuras and Morton. Necropins. Reader's discretion advised. In Iceland, a long time ago, 17th century, friends followed complex rules to obtain a dead man's skin and turn it into pants. You had to get permission from the person to use his skin after he passed away. You would then wait until burial formalities concluded. You would rob your friend's grave. You would cut at the waist and peel the bottom half of the body off in one perfect flay. You would then steal a coin from a poor widow, preferably your friend's. Place the coin in the scrotum of the necropins to attract cosmic wealth in life, and leave the groin full of coins at all times. Pass the item down to your child. Fun fact: the Museum of Icelandic Sorcery and Witchcraft has a pair on display for all enthusiasts to view. Additional, it's folklore. What is intriguing is that they dedicated a museum to all of this folklore and bothered to create a replica of a very disturbing idea. I just thought the storytelling would be fun, and I had some amazing comments come from it. Story 30. Albert Fish, the serial killer, loved eating poop. Edit. I didn't expect Uncle Albert's peanut butter to become so popular. Check out the podcast Timesuck by Dan Cummins. He has an episode about Albert Fish and goes in-depth about other serial killers in other episodes. Story 31. Human brains, when they dry out, smell like cat urine, that stinky ammonia smell. I worked in an emergency room for 17 years in Connecticut. We had a gunshot to the head incident, and a chunk fell onto my shoe without me noticing. While driving home, I wondered, did my cat urinate in the car or something? I went to take my shoes off, and there it was. Edit. For those with a morbid curiosity, fresh brains look like cream cheese mixed with strawberry jam. Edit 2. No, they died and TransLife harvested organs. Story 32. People do not take their anti-malarial drugs when they travel because they hear bad stories about the side effects and they see native people in the areas living okay without taking pills every day. The truth is, populations native to malaria-endemic areas have all passed through intense natural selection for survival and have a host of genes that prevent them from dying or suffering other severe effects. Also, most of the resistance is built up over time, which is why it is most common for children to die rather than adults. Whatever people have heard about the side effects of the anti-malarials, getting malaria is much worse. I have fortunately never had it, but I study it as part of my work, and people have told me about having it. They all say the same thing. It is so awful you cannot believe you are even still alive. Comes in cycles, usually 48 hours, and each cycle is agonizing and brings you to the brink of death. Sometimes it takes you. Sometimes it spares you for another few hours until it starts again. And there are forms that, even if you clear the infection with drugs, remain dormant in your system and can come back at any time. I do not want to frighten people too much. There are drug combinations that can kill every stage of the parasite as long as there is no drug resistance. Story 33. The stonefish, an incredibly venomous fish living in tropical waters mostly off the coast of Australia and parts of the United States, can cause pain that only escalates with time. Eventually, the pain will subside, but even after the barb is removed, patients have reported increasing pain 12 hours later. Without antivenom or denaturing the venom with excessive heat, the pain builds and builds until the patients request euthanasia. Its spines hold the venom, hidden in its dorsal fins. Aboriginals living around the Great Barrier Reef have gatherings called corroborees, where they hold reenactments of people being stung by this creature, either for amusement, learning, or both. Story 34. A black mamba is the fastest snake, capable of slithering at a speed of 12.5 miles per hour or 20 kilometers per hour. It has neurotoxins that act quickly. The venom shuts down the nervous system and paralyzes the victim. Its venom is potent enough to kill 10 people, and it repeatedly bites. Additionally, there is an almost 100% kill rate, and it can kill in 20 minutes. Story 35. More than 7,000 people die annually due to the doctor's bad handwriting. Edit. I didn't expect this to blow up so much, so if you upvoted my comment, thanks so much. Story 36. Sometimes an Amber Alert causes kidnappers to panic and harm the child immediately. For those who don't know, an Amber Alert is an important notification system. This situation is very rare, and most of the time, Amber Alerts are issued for children taken by an estranged family member where the child is in no danger. Amber Alerts have also saved hundreds of lives. Sorry for bringing the mood down. Story 37. Cockroaches have been recorded eating human flesh, both living and dead, as well as fingernails, eyelashes, feet, and hands. The American cockroach and German cockroach are more likely to bite humans than other species. I'm pretty sure Australian cockroaches do something equally creepy, but as an Australian who plans to sleep at some point in the future, I'm not going to look it up. Story 38. Blobfish in its natural habitat looks like a normal fish, but it lives so deep underwater that it does not use a normal gas bladder to keep itself balanced. Instead, it has a spongy skin that is slightly less dense than water, which becomes damaged and bloated when fishermen bring it up too quickly. It is not really the ugliest fish. It has just experienced something worse than one of us being thrown into outer space. Between sea level and space, there is 1 atmospheric pressure of difference. Between sea level and 2,000 feet underwater, their upper limit, there are 60 atmospheres of difference.